Yeah, hi peeps, this is Tersse back on the old squat box again, and I'm here with a quick, hopefully quick, clarification video to something that I said in Politics, Nationhood and Corporate Feudalism. A subscriber of mine, a friend you could say, Mann, Richard, cheers mate for the actual question that you asked me. During that video I said that America was lucky to have a two-party system for a lot of its, I think for the first 200 years of its history, And Richard Mann asked me, do you really think a two-party system is better than a multi-three or more party system, And I tried to explain it in a text comment back to him. And by the way, Richard, your comment didn't come up actually on the video, but I got it through Google Plus, which I don't know how much must work faster, but it came up as a message for me on Google Plus, but it's not on the video yet. So both your question and my answer may not be on the video yet for people, because apparently on my when I look at my video and look at posts on it, no comments. There's no comments there, neither yours nor mine. So, but this is a clarification of what I was trying to express there. What I was trying to express is America has been it's a young nation. It's only been in existence for something like 250 years or so, And in all of that time, they've mostly had a two-party system. Whereas in Europe, we've had multiple party systems for quite a considerable time. But even though we've had the possibility for multiple party systems, we've actually, for most of that time, for most of the last 400, 300 years, we've really only had two party systems as well. And through looking back at the history of my country and looking at the two-party system, I realised how bad it was for democracy. A two-party system is much easier for the parties involved to corrupt the system, to gerrymander district, to make, when they're in power, to make laws which initially make it more possible for them to be re-elected. I mean, if you look at the history of democracy in England, or the United Kingdom, Britain, there was times when only landowners could vote, and there was times when there was no law against, people being elected, going out and paying people for their vote. I mean, this is why we now have legislation, laws saying you can't go and buy people's votes. It's illegal for you to pay people to vote for you. You know what I mean? Because if you look back in the history of the English democracy as it formed, as the burgeoning idea of democracy, there were people who went out and paid people with pints of beer to vote for them, and then they got elected because they paid whole villages in pints of beer. You know what I mean? Or with a silver shilling to go to the voting booth and pay them to go in and vote for them. And they only got the shilling or the pint of beer when they came out and could prove they'd actually voted for the candidate that were getting paid to vote for. This is why we now have laws against that. Britain went through all the fucktarded corruption that you could possibly find in the system of democracy. And by the way, it hasn't stopped it from being tried and caught. I mean, we now have in America this idea of voter ID. That's a gerrymandering of the election system, taking away, what is it, same day registration. People are doing that. Taking away, early day voting. All that. This is all gerrymandering. This is all stuff that, if you look back in British democracy, it's all things we've dealt with, although we've reinvested in the ability for people to corrupt the system by bringing in mailing votes, where if you don't think you're going to be able to make it to the polls to put your cross on the paper and put it in the box, we'll send you a mailing vote out, you know, and then people try to abuse that. What they did was certain people who owned lots of rental properties, yeah, you got it, you know, people who were property owners, they owned lots of properties in which people rented houses from them. They would actually then get all those people, you know, names, and people who didn't live in properties anymore, properties that were empty but people had lived there, they would get the postal vote thing, because what the British society does is they send you an election notification letter out, and then they ask you to tick the box and send it back to say whether you'll just go and vote at your local polling station on the day, or whether you want a postal vote. So what the landlords are doing, we're gathering all these letters up for people who had rented property from but had now moved on to some other property, and they were taking those letters and ticking, send me a postal vote, and then they were artificially signing them, you know, basically fraudulently signing them with the people's names and send them in and saying, I vote for this candidate. And they got caught for it because people checked up and found out these people had voted elsewhere and didn't no longer live in that address. So they got caught. But this just shows you, as the democratic system evolves and we try to make it easier for people to participate in a democratic system, it opens up new areas for fraud. So even today, with our long existing democracy, there is room for corruption. New places where corruption can come in. And this is what you're finding in America now with a two-party system. When you've only got two parties, it's easier for fraud and corruption to creep into the system, and also it's less democratic because, say for instance, I don't agree with the Democratic Party's policies, and I don't agree with the the Republican Party's policies. Then who do I vote for? Who speaks for me? And you'll find that there's a lot of people. In fact, I bet you there's a lot of people in America who just don't vote. Not because they're not interested in politics, but there's nobody there they want to vote for because they don't represent their views. Now, some people might be in that position and say, well, although I don't find anybody who totally represents me, I'll just pick the less dangerous one. I'll pick the less evil, it's that, I think some people vote for either Republican or Democrat, not because they actually wholeheartedly want to, but because they see them as more like themselves, but not perfectly like themselves. But as you open up, like we have in Britain, we've opened it up for, well, if you're a single issue voter, and the single issue you vote on is the environment, we now have the Green Party. All their ideas, and they're not talking about fiscal policy, they're not talking about the war, they're not talking about joining Europe. A lot of their policies are simply on the environment, and people who are, that's really my one thing that I want to vote on is the environment. They vote for the Green Party, And then you get other people who are what you might call racist, and they think that the only thing that really matters to them is immigration and getting black and brown people out of Britain. They vote for the BNP or the EDL. The EDL aren't a political party, but they're trying to be. But they vote for the BNP, the British National Party. So you've got that idea. But there's lots of people in Britain vote for parties. Tiny small parties. There are people who vote just for fun. There's the raving loony party in Britain. And they put up, I think, 12 candidates one year in 12 different places, and people who thought that it was just, they don't see politics as anything really intrinsically valuable or damaging to their lives or important to them. They see, it's just a big joke and the whole of life is just a joke. They went out and voted for the Raving Loony Party, and some of these people went on stage and what you could call, in America you've got football, what do you call them? The guys that dress up like crows and eagles and stuff and run about the field. Some of these candidates from the Raven Loony Party, right, they would come on stage dressed in costumes like that, And they put £5,000 up in order to be on you know, the electorate roll to be voted for, and they would get less than 5% of the vote, and they would lose the £5,000. But that wasn't the point. They weren't there to get elected. They were just there as a fun theme park sort of, look at how stupid politics is. Even a guy dressed as a bird can come on stage and get some votes. I mean, some get 100 votes, some get 1,000 votes in some areas. But it just shows you that even in an area like Winslow or Shropshire, 1,000 people would vote for a guy dressed as a bird. And I know that this sometimes makes it look like politics is a farce. But look at your political system. Look at the people who were running for president in 2012. Did that not make it a farce? Some people in America even called it the fucking the clown fucking bus. You know what I mean? Or something like that. Maybe paraphrasing here. So Richard Mann, yeah, you were lucky over the last 250 years that you had just a dual party system. But the point is, those two parties are not representing 100% of the people in America. And eventually, America will become a multiple party system. And it's more so obvious to me that you're getting closer to the time when America will split into a more than one party system. I'm not talking about just three parties here. That may be the first initial view that America will see. There's three parties. There's the right, the left, and the centre. There's the Democrats, the Republicans, and the Independents. I mean, it might be AI, American Independence, and what a great pseudonym that would be. AI, artificial intelligence. You know what I mean? I'm just saying. I'm not saying that there would be artificial intelligence, but I'm just saying that AI, American Independent Party, ape. If you want, maybe they'll all be, atheists and believe in evolution. I don't know. I'm just saying, your country is eventually, moving towards that system of multiple parties, and it's a consequence of the division and the polarity that you have in your nation between the far left and the far right, and people are sick, I think, of the constant barrage of information that they get of horrible right-wing, talking points and horrible left-wing talking points. And I think they're sick of the idea of no matter who you vote in, it's basically the same shit. No matter whether they think you're voting for a progressive Democrat or a conservative, fiscal conservative, right-wing conservative, GOP. What you get is the same. It's the same fight that's been going on forever. It's all about raising tax and paying for poor. It's all about lowering tax and fucking the poor. That's basically or lowering tax, fucking the poor, and making sure that gay people can't be seen in public. You know what I mean? And would you call it? God, sorry, I need another drink. Think to get this last gasp of mind fat out. Yeah, right. So yeah. So women should be in the kitchen. We don't want women doing anything except having kids. Sex is only for having kids. People shouldn't even have sex for fun. We don't want the pill and we don't want condoms. People should be scared to have sex in case they get fucking pregnant. And that's the only, this is your right-wing social, controllers. That the Bible says that man and woman only have sex for kids, and if we ever let people have the pill and condoms, then they'll be having sex willy-nilly in my front yard. You know what I mean? And I don't want that. I want them to be scared to death having sex in case they get pregnant. This is why they want, and they've even got the government on your side. There's separation of church and state. They've even got the government financing sex education, abstinence only. How fucktarded is that? And people are starting to get scared of the politicians. I made a I made a recent video there about how people are scared, not of the terrorists outside their country, they're scared of the terrorists inside their country. They're scared of the fuckers with guns inside their country. They're also scared of your politicians. They've seen what happened in 2012. People are mortified of the way the world looks at them, and they're scared of your own politicians. Your politicians scare the shit out of about 30 or 40% of your country. So that's what I was saying. I didn't mean that having a two-party system was a good thing. I was saying you were lucky that over the last 250 years we've only had a two-party system, because it did make it easier for these parties, these political ideologies, to keep you afraid and scared and loving only what they would give you the opportunity to vote for. But now that you've seen, it's a bit like Europe. No, Europe is an absolutely multicultural nation now. If you call Europe a nation, because it is, it's going to eventually become a republic like America. It will, you know. But we are a multicultural society now in Europe. America is still fighting that multiculturalism. They're still trying to be something that they never were. No, a nation united as one people. You were never that. You're the same as every other European nation. You're a nation of bastardization. You know, you get fucking Jews and Catholics and Protestants and Latinos and blacks and whites, and you get communists and socialists and liberals and Democrats and libertarians rather, and Democrats and conservatives and fascists. You've got all that. You're a mishmash of everything. But you've been lucky for 250 years to have the whole of America thinking that these were just two sets, Democrat and Republican. And now that facade has dropped away. It's crumbling. It's dissolving in front of your eyes like the witch in the yellow brick road. Oh, I'm dissolving, you know. And now people are starting to realise that there is more than one choice in the world. The world is a spectrum. It's not black and white. It's not red and blue. There's a spectrum of choices. And there's a spectrum of choices on every issue. And on one issue you might be on this side, and the other issue, on another issue you might be on that side. But on another issue you might be here, bang in the middle. Or you could be anywhere along that spectrum and thousands of other issues which are pertinent to your life. And two parties can't fulfil your idea of what party covers most of my decisions. Most of what I say yes on. I don't say yes on most of what the left says. I don't say yes on most of what the right says. I may say yes to maybe an independent party in the middle that covers most of what I agree with. But if I've only got the left or right to choose from, that's what I'll vote for, left or right. But when you get a third party that moves in there and captures the middle ground that the left and the right have both just abandoned and moved off and moved away from, saying, well, nobody likes that. They either like my extreme idea or their extreme idea, and this is, we've got to polarise and make people choose between the extremes. No, that just broadens the centre until there's such a big gap in the centre that a new party will move in and say, do you know what, this is what we believe. And you might agree with 3 or 4 points of them, or 3 or 4 points of them, but you agree with 10 points of us, so join us. And that's what's going to happen in America. I didn't mean by saying that you were lucky to have a two-party system for 250 years, that it was a good system. I was just saying you were lucky that it didn't fragment, into a multi-party system until now. And I think now, and going on to the future, you will see America fragment into a multi-party system. And by the way, it's a better form of democracy, so long as it doesn't go into the craziness of having 300 parties. 300 national parties would be too much. I mean, but even in the United Kingdom today, we have 3 main parties, and it evolved because, as I say, it's the Liberal Democrats who have coalitioned with the Conservatives. But I think originally it was the the Conservatives, Labour and the Liberal Party. And then another party formed called the Democratic Party. And what happened was the Liberal Party and the Democratic Party kind of didn't have enough votes anywhere, and they sort of fragmented, but the main bulk of the Democrats and the Liberals decided that they could come together, and then they formed a single party called the Liberal Democrat Party. And that's how we've got three parties rather than two main parties and two very small insignificant parties. Now we have two main parties and a reasonably, moderately large Liberal Democrat Party. But even them now, they're growing. They're capturing Labour seats, they're capturing Conservative seats, so much so that they're now in coalition with the Conservatives. That would have been unseen 40 or 50 years ago. It was Conservatives and Labour. That's it. And so that's why I say that, you know, in the next 15, 20, maybe 30 years, you'll see America go through that same metamorphosis, you know what I mean? That change, that adaptation to a multiple party. And it will only be good for the idea of democracy. The problem, as I see it, is that you will go through that same period of how many parties would you allow to, you know, be involved in an election. The way that we covered it in Europe, well, in the United Kingdom, is we allow anybody to stand for election, so long as they put down I think it's £500, it might be £5,000, you know. So we say $5,000. If you can raise $5,000, well, in America you do it differently. You've got to get 100,000 signatures. So you could do that. You know, you could start your own party. You know, you could be the Raven-Looney Party of America. You know, and so long as you've got 1,000 people to put signatures on a document, you could put it in and say, like, now I'm standing for mayor of or representative of New Jersey. You know what I mean? And if that's the way you go, then you will see more and more parties, you know, step out there onto the platform of democracy and say, I want to run for office. You know, you will see that happen anyway. I'm just wondering whether you go through the same as you know, my country, where we have hundreds of political parties. Some of them only exist in one tiny little, you know, area. You know, I mean, you have states, and then your states are broken down into districts, I think. You know, so you might only have one guy in one district stand up and say, you know, I've got 1,000, you know, people signed my petition, so I'm going to run for office. You know, and he might call himself the Raven-Looney Party of America, and he might fail to get elected. But you know, in another country somewhere, there'll be someone else who stands up and calls himself the South Carolinian NRA member of it. But you know, I'm just making stuff up here. But you know, somebody makes some other political name up and runs for office in another county, and you know, you'll have that. But so long as these people are only, you know, insignificant burps, you know, and you end up with some main parties, 3 at least, but 4 is not unimaginable in a place the size of America. You know, you will have a more democratic system, because some of those parties will speak for people who have a mind who likes the party, the party's ideas, the party's, you know, what do you call it? Oh, you know, a party comes up and they say, this is what I stand for, blah, 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 blah. You know, my mind, hold on, let's have another drink. Yeah, policies, no, the party policies. They prefer the party policy of, say, the American Independent Party, rather than the Democratic Party or the Republican Party. But there's room there for another party. You could have the American, maybe not Green Party, but the American Party for, you know, the environment or something. The American Environmental Party. You know, you could have that. You know, it would be reciprocal to the Green Party in the United Kingdom. You could have that. So you could have a 4-party system in America, and perhaps they wouldn't win the presidency, But I could definitely see the American Independent Party or the American Environmental Party winning states, you know what I mean? If not, winning, 10 out of 20 seats on a state senate, they might win 5 seats on a state senate, and then nobody in the state senate could pass a bill without getting them on their side, and that makes democracy much more accountable. Because if you've only got 2 parties and all you've got is a majority on one side who just overrule everybody else, like you see in the States at the moment, can you imagine if you have 3 or 4 parties and nobody's got a whole majority in a state, and they want to, say for instance, ban abortion, and they've only got like 18 seats out of 40. If everybody else went against them, went into a coalition against them and voted them down, the bill fails. So bad bills don't get passed, you understand? Only good bills. That is supposing that all the other people have got reasonable, rational people as candidates, you know what I mean? But at the moment, you've got whole fucking Senate, state Senate and state houses who are just filled with fundamentalist Christian fucktards who are just pushing through whole loads of bullshit and fucking your country up. I really think multiple party democracy in America could be the saving of America. Because at the moment, man, yous are heading for a cliff, and if you don't fucking, rein in the horses or, put the brakes on, fucking hell, what a cataclysm that's going to be for the world, not just for America. But anyway, I'm just saying, I hope that this, Richard, man, I hope this expresses and answers your question, expresses what I feel about democracy and how there is a reasonable amount of, having multiple parties, which does good. Too little amount of parties is bad for any country, and too many parties is also too confusing, and you can never reach consensus. So there's probably somewhere, as I say, it's a sliding scale. There's a spectrum, and somewhere in the middle of the too many parties and too few parties, there's probably that golden sort of line where that's just right, and it gives everybody the ability to have their voice heard and to drive the ideas of the nation forward without fucking up too often, Anyway, I hope I've clarified that topic, and Slán Givan.